I'm Blair Best. It's Wednesday here on The Story, and tonight, the companies who operate data centers could soon be paying way more for all the power they use in this digital age, where some say the current system is unsustainable and unfair. Plus, it's a side to the homeless crisis that we don't often hear about: homeless women giving birth inside tents, how often this happens, and what a first responder has to say about it. But first, there is still no transportation funding package in Salem. But today, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle had plenty to say about their priorities. And it's our big story tonight. With less than a month left in the legislative session, one of the big cornerstones this year, funding transportation, is missing in action. We've only seen a bullet point framework document released 2 months ago. But this morning, a group of Democratic lawmakers called for the framework to be expanded with more support for safety and public transit.
If we take a purely traditional single occupancy vehicle approach to this, as we've done for most of our history, we are going to fail. What we need to provide is an adequate transportation system, infrastructure for people who want to keep using their own cars for all their travel, and a viable option for folks who might want to do something else. That option has to be reliable and convenient, and that is the challenge of transit.
Democrats control the legislature, so today's press conference was basically a faction of Dems calling the co-chairs of the Joint Transportation Committee, Democrats Chris Gorsuch and Susan McLean, to take their priorities into account. The baseline framework released 2 months ago is called TRIP, which stands for Transportation Reinvestment Plan. Here are some of the takeaways that you should be aware of. A 20-cent per gallon jump in the gas tax over the span of 6 years, a $66 increase in registration fees, a $90 increase in vehicle title fees, and a new system use fee, which would be a 1% fee the state would collect when you buy a vehicle based on how much it costs, and plans to phase in a pay-per-mile plan, starting with electric vehicles as early as next year. Now, the plan aims to end the state's chronic transportation funding crunch by raising nearly $2 billion in new revenue every budget cycle, most of which would go to the state highway fund that pays for road maintenance. Now, as we told you on Monday, there are also discussions about cutting back on DEQ emissions testing to save some money. But the Democrats who gathered this morning say that plan needs to go further.
Our transportation system is currently underinvested and has been disinvested for the past few decades. So unfortunately, we're going to have a conversation with Oregonians about what they're willing to invest in to ensure that we have roads that are not full of potholes, kids that can get to school safely, and public transit options.
Now, their proposed version, which they call SAFE, modern, affordable, reliable transportation, as in SMART, leaves a lot of the TRIP framework in place, but pushes some of the tax hikes even higher, raising the gas tax by 40 cents, for example, rather than 20. They said the extra revenue would prevent any service cuts at transit agencies statewide, and it would mean much more money for many of the TRIP plan's proposed investments, 5 times as much money for safe routes to school, for example, plus money for new investments like grants and rebates for electric vehicles and chargers.
Right now, transit agencies across the state are looking at cuts to service if they get the funding levels currently included in the TRIP. But we've also known that was just a first draft, and we expect to see the first bill language to be released soon in the next few days. So we're hopeful that with this kind of advocacy and the strong support we're getting from legislators, that we'll see it in the first bill language.
So once the package is made public, allegedly coming any day now, there will no doubt be plenty of political drama and proposed amendments from Democrats and Republicans. Back in April, House Minority Leader Christine Drazan called the initial framework, quote, a slap in the face. She said the focus should be on what she called ODOT's core mission. That's things like plowing roads and filling potholes. Republicans released their own proposed package framework last month, but it mostly proposed filling the road maintenance funding gap by cutting funding elsewhere rather than raising taxes. Things like moving $146 million from climate initiatives to the state highway fund and $38 million action taken from passenger rail service.
We don't think that Oregonians should be asked to pay for climate initiatives through the Department of Transportation. And so the Democrats, through this process, have continued to double down on status quo. They want to do everything this agency has been doing, and frankly, they haven't been doing it well, and they want to pay more for more of the same.
Now, one of the most eye-catching pieces from the GOP was a proposal to take half the revenue from the public transit payroll tax and give it to truckers for 2 years as a tax break to repay them. Because, according to Republicans, truckers pay a disproportionate share of the tax right now. Now, after 2 years, the entire payroll tax would go to the highway fund. The plan did not mention what the transit agencies were expected to do. But given that TriMet, for example, gets nearly 70% of its funding from that payroll tax, there would no doubt be some service cuts. Will Democrats even entertain that idea? Not likely. But it's not entirely a political show because, as this morning's press conference illustrates, the Democrats aren't totally united. So, if they end up divided over two versions of the package, that could give Republicans more leverage. But the next few weeks are going to be a sprint to get the final version hammered out, and we will be watching. But now let's hear your thoughts. What do you think about the proposals on the table or the proposed fee hikes? Maybe you like the Republicans' proposal. Email us at thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Well, turning now to Portland's homeless crisis and a side of street life that we don't often hear about, homeless women giving birth. Since February, Portland Fire and Rescue responded to 4 pregnancy calls. 2 happened in April, all on the streets of downtown Portland. Now, I caught up with a lieutenant who has responded to several of these calls, the latest in Old Town. He says in his 18 years as a Portland firefighter, he has never seen calls like this as frequently as they've been coming in lately. But before you hear from him, I just want to warn you that what you're about to hear are graphic descriptions of those scenes that may be disturbing for some of you. But we do feel it's important to understand what first responders are dealing with and what's really happening on the streets.
Yeah, for the one down on 3rd and Flanders, down in Old Town, we pulled up. There's tents, there's debris around, there's probably 5 or 6 homeless people around, and then we had our patient, and there she was on her hands and knees, and she was visibly pregnant, 7, 8, 9 months pregnant, and her water had broken, and she needed to go to the hospital. And then you kind of have this other scene around you with people that are very emotionally charged and fired up as well.
So in that case, an ambulance showed up and they were able to transport the baby to the hospital. But Hanley says that is not the case for all street births.
Once the mother did not give birth yet, we put her in the ambulance. Once, right when we arrived, the baby had been born, and it was a non-viable child. And then another time, a child was found outside of a tent, and it was not viable. When we arrived, it wasn't viable. When the person found it, and it still had the umbilical cord attached, and so that was obviously a non-viable child.
Now, even though we don't often hear about this happening on the streets, it's nothing new. Last year, I met a woman who helped her 26-year-old friend give birth on a blue tarp.
All of a sudden, she's just like, "Becky, help me, please help me." And I'm like, "What, baby?" And she goes, "It hurts, it hurts." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's call 911.
Southwest First and Harvey Mills by an orange tent. Someone is starting to give birth.
We put her on this cart right here. And then wheeled her down there. And so I just told her, I was like, "Just relax." She goes, "I'm scared." I said, "It's okay."
I'm not sure how imminent this was when it was tapped, but the baby's head and shoulders are out.
Okay, so shortly after that day last year, I found the mother. She was back on the streets, still struggling with her fentanyl addiction, and she was camping in the Goose Hollow neighborhood. She told me her family was caring for the newborn child. She didn't want to go on camera. But the fact that she was back on the streets within just a matter of days is something that Lieutenant Hanley says does not surprise him.
I think it's sad. I think it's hard. You know, the mothers and patients that I've been on, they don't have any pre-pregnancy care. So they're not even going to the hospital to get routine checkups. So it doesn't surprise me that someone or a mother would have a child and then the next day they're out, or 2 days later they're back on the streets.
Now, there's no doubt these kinds of traumatic situations take a toll on the newborn babies and their homeless mothers, but also the first responders. So I asked Lieutenant Hanley how his team deals with the emotional impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we just we talk with each other. If people have a hard time with that, we have a great peer support group that we can talk with. We have a great peer support coordinator who can help us out. So there's resources for us personally that we can use. But we lean on each other, we talk to each other, and we support each other in the firehouse.
Meanwhile, California's governor is taking bold action to address homeless encampments. Earlier this month, Governor Gavin Newsom released new guidelines urging cities to immediately clear dangerous and unhealthy camps. Now, this comes as $3 billion in voter-approved funding became available in California to expand housing and drug treatment. Now, the new camp removal guidelines, which are allowed to be modified, include banning persistent camping in one location, banning camping that blocks sidewalks, and requiring local officials to provide notice and make every reasonable effort to find the person shelter before removing the camp. Now, this move follows Governor Newsom's executive order last year urging all cities to quickly address homeless camps. At that time, he posted this video to social media announcing that order from inside a California camp.
Today I announced an executive order to move the process forward. We're done. It's time to move with urgency at the local level to clean up these sites, to focus on public health and focus on public safety. This executive order is about pushing that paradigm further and getting a sense of urgency that's required of local government to do their job.
So that executive order stemmed from the U.S. Supreme Court decision to overturn Martin v. Boise, a case that originated in Grants Pass, Oregon. The ruling allows states to criminalize homeless camping even when there is no available shelter. So essentially, reshaping how cities can choose to deal with the crisis. But fast forward to May of this year, regarding his latest guidelines, Governor Newsom wrote in a statement, "There's nothing compassionate about letting people die on the streets. Local leaders asked for resources. We delivered the largest state investment in history. They asked for legal clarity. The courts delivered." He went on saying, "Now we're giving them a model they can put to work immediately, with urgency and with humanity, to resolve encampments and connect people to shelter, housing, and care. The time for inaction is over. There are no more excuses." Now, here in Oregon, there is a state law, House Bill 3115, which says Oregon cities can enact camping bans and penalize people for sleeping outside, but they must meet reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions when doing so. Now, we have talked about that law a lot on the show. The term reasonable is the hang-up for many local jurisdictions and courts, for that matter, from enforcing rules against homeless camping. The bill passed in 2021, and its chief sponsor was a state rep named Tina Kotek. So we asked her office about Governor Newsom's new crackdown on homeless camps. A spokesperson dodged my question and told me the governor is focused on staying the course on what we see working in Oregon. Through Governor Kotek's leadership and in partnership with the Oregon legislature and communities around the state, the governor's homelessness emergency response is on track to support over 4,800 shelter beds, rehouse 3,300 households, and prevent another 24,000 households from experiencing homelessness by June 30th, 2025. Well, turning now to an update on a story out of Gresham. City councilors there were frustrated last month about a permanent homeless shelter Multnomah County was trying to open in the building you're looking at there, called Cook Plaza off Southeast Stark Street.
And we don't have that homeless population to fill it. So you're going to be bringing people out of the area into our area, and when you don't have the services to wrap around and help them, then where are they going to go at the end of the day?
We're not interested in taking care of our neighbors' homeless problem.
Now, Multnomah County has owned that building we were showing you there for about 3 years now. During that time, they've used it as a temporary severe weather shelter. But the new plan was to turn it into a permanent day center and tiny home village for homeless people. They were planning to invest $8 million into the project. But now the county has pressed pause for at least 90 days. Chair Jessica Vega Peterson said in a statement today, "There continues to be a great need for these resources in East County. We are committed to staying at the table with elected leaders and the community to make sure our strategic visions align so that we can move these resources forward together." In an email shared with the story team, Gresham's assistant city manager told the city councilors today that County Commissioner Vince Jones-Dixon, who previously served on Gresham City Council, was a major player in pausing the project. But what about that $8 million earmarked for the shelter? We know the county is facing a budget shortfall, so every dollar counts here. Well, no word on what might happen with the money, but it should come as no surprise that city leaders in Gresham hope the money is invested in East Portland, not just for the shelter project. Well, coming up next on the story, a new computer chip being developed at Oregon State could help places like data centers use less electricity to power things like artificial intelligence. It comes as Oregon lawmakers work to make those data centers pay their fair share for all that power use. Details on both efforts when the story returns. Federal authorities say a Washington man provided chemicals to make explosives that were used to bomb a Palm Springs, California fertility clinic last month. The FBI says 32-year-old Daniel Park from Kent, Washington, was taken into custody last night at JFK Airport in New York City. U.S. attorneys say Park shipped 180 pounds of ammonium nitrate to Guy Edward Bartuks, who bombed the clinic. The explosion injured 4 people and caused major damage. Investigators believe Bartuks died in the blast. The case is now being investigated as an act of terrorism.
AI is evolving quickly. It's powerful and it's power hungry. A new report from the International Energy Agency says that globally, we're set to nearly double our energy usage in the next 5 years, much of that due to the explosion of artificial intelligence. Researchers at Oregon State University have developed a new computer chip that cuts at least one aspect of AI electricity use in half. In fact, they're using AI to solve an AI problem.
The amount of communication that we are talking about is of the orders of hundreds of trillions of bits going around in a data center in order to do something.
OSU Associate Professor Tejasvi Anand is talking about the immense amount of data zipping across the internet. He and graduate assistant Raman Javadi have been trying to make that data transfer smarter and more efficient. It's urgent.
In 2030, the power that we need to, spend on AI, it would be 35 gigawatt, which can be 6 times the power the New York City is consuming in a year.
That's nearly enough to power 29 million homes for a year. In fact, the International Energy Agency says AI alone will account for about a 20% increase in U.S. energy demand in the next 5 years. Just asking ChatGPT about its own energy usage draws up to 15 times the power of a typical Google search. Javadi and Anand are now using AI to solve an AI problem.
We are implementing some AI principles in the chip itself to recognize those errors and clean the errors up in a very more efficient way and a smarter way than the conventional transceivers.
To better understand the discovery, consider how traditional data is sent in bits and small pieces of a larger puzzle, shot at warp speed through a data center from chip to chip, disassembled along the way, then reassembled at the destination. The new OSU chip bypasses all the intermediate translation.
We are able to basically recover the data or communicate the data from point A to point B in less than half the power than that was required in some of the previous solutions that exist in the industry today.
Now, the professor says it may take the tech industry a few years to pivot to a design like this, but he's already working on advanced versions to make it a reality. Well, in Salem, the Oregon Senate, passed a bill that would set up a separate pricing system for huge electricity users like data centers. They're calling House Bill 3546 the Power Act. That stands for Protecting Oregonians with Energy Responsibility. Electricity users who use more than 20 megawatts would be designated as a large energy use facility. One of the bill's sponsors, Senator Janine Salmon, says data centers need to pay their fair share.
The numbers tell a very, very stark story. Over the past 5 years, data center growth on PGE's system alone has been equivalent to adding 406,000 people. That's nearly 4 times the population of the city of Hillsborough. While household energy bills have increased by 7.63 cents per kilowatt hour, large industrial customers in the same category as data centers have seen increases of only 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay, so she says the initial rate they're paying is also unfair and that you, the residential customers, are bearing the burden.
19.6 cents per kilowatt for residential, 8.2 cents a kilowatt hour for industrial/data centers. That's PGE's 2024 rates. This disparity is unsustainable and unfair to Oregon families.
Opponents of the bill say data centers should pay less. They're buying in bulk. They said if this bill passes, it will make Oregon less attractive to tech companies.
We shouldn't be singling out industries like this. As we know, Oregon is one of the states, the state on the West Coast, where you have a lot of the data cables that come into the state, and so it's ideal for these type of data centers and industry, and singling them out is not good policy or good business.
Now, the bill passed the Senate 18-12 on party lines, and it's scheduled for a House vote tomorrow. Keep it right there. We're back after this. Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. If you ever miss an episode of The Story at 6:30, we re-air the episode at 8:30 and 10:30 p.m. on our TV app, KJW+. You can also catch us the next day at 11:30 a.m. Just download the free app now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Have a great Wednesday night. I'm off for the rest of the week, but we've got some great stories coming for you tomorrow night at 6:30.